All right, guys. So I think we got cut off, but we were talking about Isaac. Isaac, this guy actually added on to the previous category that we were speaking about. So let me just make this slide a little bit bigger. Right, there we go. So we're talking about trait personality theories, right? Trait personality theories first are composed of the Myers-Briggs type indicator, but then it wasn't so well adjusted. So comes Einstein, and Einstein actually adds categories to it. He adds the temperament category because he thought that it was very essential and needed in order to tell and to categorize people, right? So also, he was one to implement these components. So phlegmatic, to have a phlegmatic type of personality means to be peaceful and relaxed. To be sanguine, you're optimistic and active. To be choleric, you are short-tempered and irritable. And to be a melancholic, you're analytical and quiet. So these came about after taking the inventory that Isaac came up with, or his personality questionnaire. And this is the type of data that you would get whenever taking the test. So Isaac then sought to design the questionnaire that measured one's degree of introversion and extroversion, emotional stability, and emotional instability. This model found such traits were primarily genetic link. So they typically, when we are a certain way, it's because it's genetically comes from our parents. So after the cognitive revolution, many of Isaac's genetic temperament and characteristic theories were confirmed. For example, one who is genetically predisposed to extroversion has distinct frontal lobe activity. Additionally, they are more sensitive to dopamine and receive more when talking and engaging with people. So this is the type of chart they would use in order to categorize you depending on your traits. Now, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory is a personality inventory that not only measures one's traits, personality, but it also is intended to assess one's psychopathy. So, this is a study of mental disorders. The MMPI is generally given to people suspected of or diagnosed of mental disorders. They are given a series of questions and scenarios, a lot of true or false, with the intention of seeing where patients deviate from the norm. One of the easiest ways to identify psychopathy in individuals is to see how they consistently score when compared to average mentally healthy person and others suffering from some of psychopathy. If they score near an average person, they are likely in the normal range. If they score far from the average person or near the answers of someone with psychopathy, they are likely suffering from a mental disorder. A clinician can even use this test to determine which mental disorder they may have, depending on how their answers match up with others. This is a crazy type of inventory, but it is very, very useful. While the test was created in the 1940s, it has been updated several times since, and it is one of the most accurate forms of personality and psychopathy measurements available. Now, answers are empirically assessed by a computer. However, these questions are completely subjective, and some are quite weird. For example, one true or false question was, "Do you pick your nose in private?" While the amount of questions, as well as the year's data collected, yield fairly accurate results. This test has been misused for job and employment opportunities. Some businesses have used to test to assess screen potential hires. However, some of these scores are likely skewed, as prospective employees are likely to provide dishonest answers that they see as socially acceptable to aid their chances of being hired. Now, the Big Five. The Big Five is a it's a big part of the personality theories, and you need to know about it. You need to be aware about it. They typically ask about this part of the personality unit or section a lot. So, uh, actually, so the big five personality traits were drawn through a psychometric technique known as factor analysis. Factor analysis is essential to maximize reducing of variables by locating underlying similarities in those variables. So, for example, you just compare a lot of variables and you see how related they are. Factor analysis is essentially maximizing reducing variables by locating underlying similarities within those variables. For example, if I were to ask you three questions, And the answer is no. The underlying variable or question in this case is basically happiness. Using factor analysis on surveys can reduce the underlying variables to what we are actually asking about. People who share underlying personality traits or variables often answer questions very similarly. What Dickman and Goldberg essentially did was to reduce our personality traits and variables. So before these guys, before Dickman and Goldberg, there were a lot of traits that people would talk about, way too many. So they thought that they would boil it down to only five. So they came up with these five broad categories that house other types of personality characteristics. So they came up with openness, how people high in traits open often appreciate emotion, art, unusual or new ideas and experiences, and curiosity. Those low in trait openness are fulfilled by perseverance, data, and sometimes dogmatic beliefs. Conscientiousness is just like the ability to think about the things that you've done and that you will do. And people with high in trait conscientiousness are generally dutiful, well disciplined, organized, dependable, focused, and aim for achievement. Those with low in trait conscientiousness tend to be spontaneous, undisciplined, unorganized, flexible, and unreliable. Now, extroversion it's just being like extroverted. You're wanting to be the center of attention. Those in with high traits of extroversion tend to enjoy being the center of attention, socializing, talking, are energetic and often assertive. Those with low in trait extroversion tend to be very reserved, reflective, and may prefer less or little socializing. Now, agreeableness is just the sense of whether you agree or not. Those with high sense of agreeableness tend to be compassionate, cooperative, kind, trusting, and even naive. People with low trait agreeableness tend to be competitive, challenging, argumentative, and self-serving. Now, neuroticism is those with high neuroticism tend to be prone to psychological stress, depression, anxiety, anger, frustration, impulsiveness, and emotional instability. People with low trait neuroticism tend to be stable, calm, less prone to negative emotions, but may be unconcerned with others and uninspiring. So, neuroticism is how do you approach your life on an everyday basis? Are you very out and about, or are you to yourself? So, these are the big five components. And if you want to remember these, just remember the acronym OCEAN. This is one part that they probably might ask if they do ask about this unit. Now, the big five factors personality test is just simply a personality test where people just answer questions. And regardless of the type of test, personality tests have shown that genes play a major role in traits. While the environment can steer our set of choices and values, one's traits, preferences, and interests are largely genetic. One criticism, however, is that research shows that we tend to act differently around people and at times impacted by genes mostly, but which traits we showcase can be impacted by our surroundings. There is little in the way of credible criticism. However, as many trait personalities argue that one's inability to maintain a steady set of traits is the presence. I'm sorry, guys. Let me pick this back up. Is the presence of different people actually reflects trait neuroticism. So, yeah, the big five components or the big five factors, characteristics of personality are the big five, the ones that we just covered. Ocean. You can also remember using the acronym CANOE, but it's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These are the big five factors or big five characteristic traits in personality that people have that we can then expand and talk about them more. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the big five, right? So within the big five, you could actually have more traits. Within conscientiousness, you can have more traits, so on and so forth. Now, one more thing that we'll talk about is the fact that personality also tends to be affected by the culture that we live in because individuals who live in collectivist countries experience a far greater loss of identity as their self-concepts build on connections of family, friends, work, etc. To collectivists, groups provide a sense of security, values, and network of caring for people. Collectivists often defer to the opinions or desires of others. They avoid conflict, or they're not blunt, they're not confrontational, generally preferring and exhibiting more positive, polite, and agreeable behavior. So, collectivist countries tend to rub off a certain way on individuals, and they tend to make them act a certain way and behave and have a certain personality. So within individualist countries in the West, like ours, we tend to be more independent. The identity tends to be remain intact if isolated. For example, if a person from an individualist culture moves to another country, they are likely to retain their sense of self, confidence, and personality traits. When in groups, individualists pursue personal goals, individual drives, and self-satisfaction rather than group harmony. While groups and support are still sought, the purpose is usually self-serving, and individualists are much more likely to switch social groups, employment, and location to pursue their own goals. So you can see how even culture and the places that we live can have an effect on personality, not only our genetics, not only the situation, not only the experiences or our traits, but also even the culture that we live among. So when we're thinking about personality, we need to think about so many characteristics, so many factors that rub off on us that make us act a certain way and make us have a certain personality. So it was really great to have you guys. This was a great review. I hope you watch it and have yourself a great day.